We're in a different location.
Uh,
Eh. Welcome to our cosmic journey. Today is the 18th of November at, let's see, 4:42 p.m. in Snohomish, Washington, USA. Hello, Trey.
Hello, Jake.
Yeah, so we had a flight. Let's see, we had a flight yesterday, right? It's hard to
Yeah,
say when
I
time
know.
time time warps
It's the
when you
weirdest when you
are.
come from Berlin to the West Coast of the United States because you fly for 10 hours and you get off the plane at the same time you got on it, which
Yeah,
is
in,
bizarre.
this is insane. And for the most part, I think we handled it really well. But we're
We're
a
pretty
little
jet
bit
lagged.
crispy. Yeah, we're a little jet lagged, a little bit
Yeah.
crispy today. Hopefully that translates into a great experience for the viewer. We'll find out, though. You
Good
never know.
YouTube content is always
Good,
coming from people whose brains are
good,
half switched off.
good YouTube content. Yeah, exactly. As long as we don't say something really horrible that gets us canceled, I guess we're going to be fine. So today's episode is called Leaky Pipes. We're in episode 9, and we're going to start with the check-in, of course, as always, and then we have 3 things to talk about today because it's always good to talk about 3 things. One is because it's leaky pipes, we're going to talk about fixing the memory leak, otherwise known as Chell Part 3 or C Hell. Trey will talk a little bit about that. Beyond that, he has a very exciting development around hotkey reimplementation, and then we're going to talk a little bit about just like how we make decisions in this world, generally speaking. And we don't have a third thing really to go, so we're like, I'll just talk about some meta stuff around decision quality.
Yeah,
But
this is an important one though. You're
it
downplaying
is,
the importance of this.
it is important, and I'm not fully. We don't have a full presentation around that, or I guess a point of view around that. But you know what? We could just have a discussion around it because it's our podcast. What are you gonna
Yeah,
do?
we do whatever the hell we want. Also, it's not like we spend hours planning these things out. I mean, we do one a week. Come on.
I mean, there was planning in this one because we're sitting in different places, and therefore we had to do lighting schemes. And Trey did say, "Now this is the thing."
Yes,
So,
I'm in my mother's office.
and I'm in the downstairs living room type of thing, which has a beautiful painting of bears that are that are like doing a little bear jamboree. It's one of the weirdest paintings I've ever seen in my life.
Yeah, it's cool. I love
Um,
that.
yeah, I do too. My checking question: Are you ready?
Okay, let's do it.
Okay, it's a two-parter, and after you answer the first part, you're going to get the second part. Which so you have 2 separate questions to answer.
Okay, I like it.
Don't I saw you try to say you were about to say something snide or
I know I
like that.
wasn't. I wasn't.
Okay,
How
that's right.
dare you?
If you had one person in history that you could have dinner with, who would it be and why?
Oh, like right off the top of my head, I want it to be um, like John D. or maybe even before that, like I'm trying to think of who would be a really good person to I don't know, learn ceremonial magic from. That's who I want to talk to.
That's who I was thinking you wanted to talk to as well, and I don't exactly know who that person's going to be.
Yeah, I feel like John D would just be a really amazing person to just sit down and talk to because I think my feeling about him because he's much maligned because of certain things, but then also he just had this really crazy life too with all these crazy ups and downs, and there's a ton of stuff that we owe to him, and so I don't know. I just think it would be really cool to talk to him. So there we go, John
Okay.
D. That's my answer.
Okay, mine is, and the first one that came to my mind was Ada Lovelace, only because
Oh,
as
that's a
the
really good answer.
great grandmother of computer science
Yeah,
and programming, she seems like a pretty cool cat to have a conversation with.
yeah, she was by all accounts just incredible. The first programmer.
The first programmer.
Yeah.
Okay, second part. Ready? You're having dinner with John D. He gets to direct the entire conversation. You are allowed one and only one question to guide the conversation in the way that you would like it to be guided. And you can only ask this one question to John D. What would you ask?
Oh, I think I would ask. I think I would ask. Oh God, I don't know. That's such a hard question, and my brain is like not fully here for it. I don't know. I think I would ask him what keeps him going.
Well, literally nothing at this point, but
Yeah, yeah. Well, I
uh,
mean, well, you don't know that. What do you know? You don't know nothing.
I don't know. Yeah. Who am I? Who am I to say anything? What keeps you going, John B?
What keeps you going?
Um, I think my question for Ada would be, you're going to, it's a terrible question, but whatever. You're going to have a disappointing programming language. It's the programming language is not disappointing. The performance of it, meaning like how it
Yeah.
lasts, is going to be disappointing. How do you feel about that? Maybe she's just like, what's a programming language? I don't know. Maybe she just would be like, I don't understand what you're talking about.
Yeah, maybe. Yeah, because it was on a like a DARPA grant or something, like a government defense grant, basically.
Yeah, the Ada language was
Out of language.
developed.
Yeah. Yeah, yeah. So
It's
yeah, it was paid for. It was paid for by the government, and the government was like, "Well, we're gonna extract a bunch of value out of it by charging people like tons of money to use it." And then, of course, um, yeah, C. This would be a nice segue into
yeah, exactly.
into C hell. And then
And
yeah, and then
because
they
C
were
was
like, "Yeah,
freely
whatever,
available.
just open source. You know, anybody use it for whatever." And then they ended up winning.
Yeah.
No, it's a
I mean,
terrible.
that's and like it's funny that we learned that lesson probably in 1950s and 1960s, and yet that lesson didn't stick through many corporations for a long time, and until I'd say probably like 20 years ago, maybe 30 years ago, when all of a
Yeah.
sudden um, open source software and the kind of free exchange, free love, free software love was the name of the game.
Yeah. Yeah.
Well,
Indeed.
unfortunately, you had to deal with the terribleness of the C language, and
Oh
therefore
God.
it goes into fixing the memory leak, Chell or C Hell, part three. Spoiler alert. I think there's a happy ending to the story. Trey, take it away.
Yeah, well, I mean, in especially since this ended up actually taking a fraction of the amount of time that we thought that it was going to take. Certainly than I thought it was going to take. And
Yeah.
there's not really like I have. Okay, well here I'll share my screen. That's because it's not really like because it's kind of like an underlying thing. So when we showed the screen last time, we it was not like auto updating, and I mentioned that the reason that it wasn't auto updating is because when running this our new Swiss ephemeris stuff that's running within the browser, uh, it had a memory leak, and so after a certain period of time it would just crash out, and that is now been fixed, and so I could let this run for forever, and
Yeah.
and there would be no problem. And also in fixing this, we changed, we refactored some things, and we actually significantly 25x reduced the amount of memory that was being allocated for each one of these calls. So it's a much smaller, tinier thing now, and it's very consistently operating like, depending upon the browser and the OS, somewhere between 2 to 10 milliseconds
It's
to
so great.
render all of this. Yeah.
Yeah. And I
And
mean, there's not a whole lot that's being rendered on the screen except for the fact that it's doing calculations constantly in the background. And these things are instantaneous, which Trey demonstrated last week.
yeah, exactly. And I also demonstrated last week that you could, I can turn off the server and it just keeps on chugging along. And yeah, it's great. So yeah, so we fixed that, and the one of the interesting things about that was that we talked a little bit before about uh, utilizing machine learning as a tool for a bunch of different things. Like we use it for all kinds of different things. It doesn't ever generate code for us, but I talk to ChatGPT all the time for getting unstuck on things, for getting good advice, like, reviewing things like, here's what I'm thinking. Do you think this is a good idea? And it often is able to provide some really good insight.
Yeah.
And for this particular memory leak, which had to do with the fact that it wasn't just the fact that the memory leak was in C, which it was, and it was in our wrapper, as I thought that it was.
correctly. You correctly identified that it was in a place that you did not want to be in.
Yes, yeah, exactly. But also that it wasn't like in the Swiss ephemeris, for example, which I thought was going to be very unlikely anyway, because it's used by lots of people for lots of different stuff. So that seemed pretty unlikely, and that wasn't the case. It was in the code that we had written, and but the complicated nature of it is that the way in which you have to do this kind of memory management is more complicated when you are calling your C code from JavaScript. So the allocation of memory, like you want the when you say like, here's a thing that I can do, like you can ask me to go and do a bunch of astrology calculations for you. And in order for me to do that, I need to have a little bit of chunk of space in order to work in. And so then you say, okay, here's your chunk of space. And then it works within that space. And then it goes back out. And then you're like, okay, I don't need this chunk of space anymore. I can get rid of it. And if all of that is happening within C, then it's pretty straightforward. It's still a thorny mess, but it's relatively straightforward. But when you're doing that from JavaScript, that's when things get very strange. But I talked to ChatGPT and I was like, okay, here's the weird situation that I'm in. We're doing this thing with WASM, and then it's this generated JavaScript thing, and then we wrap that with a web worker and all of this stuff. And ChatGPT was like, yeah, you want to kind of do it like this, and gave even some like little snippets of example code, which were, like they weren't. It wasn't like
they were directionally correct. They weren't necessarily. They weren't fully correct.
Yeah, directionally correct. And the good thing about that was the way that I was going to try to fix this problem was going to be way over engineered, like very, very complicated, probably problematic, probably difficult to maintain. And part of that was just, I was like, I don't know how else I'm going to do this. Like, it's really weird. And then talking to ChatGPT got me pointed in the right direction. And then I like looked up some other documentation and I was like, okay, we can do it this way. Like, this makes sense. And then like 2 hours later, I'm messaging Jake and sending him videos. I'm like, oh my God, it's fixed. Look at this. Yeah. And I'm like, calling it like thousands of times a second, basically as fast as the computer can do it. And it's just keeping up, and no problem.
And I have to say, I was having a really, really rough day at work because I was in meetings until I think like 8 p.m. And I kept writing Trey. I was like, it looks like everything's great. I can't wait to watch these videos. It cannot happen right now. And it was so excited to be like, I want to see, because up until this point, like Trey said, look, we're going to we do what's called cycle planning. We figure out what's going to be put in the cycle and what we're not going to put in the cycle. And Trey said, I have essentially no faith that I will fix a memory problem and maybe one very small other thing. And he was expecting that this Chell part 3 was going to take 4 days to fix.
Yeah, I thought 3 or 4 days for sure.
Yeah. ChatGPT earned her cash on that one. She did a good job on that one.
Yeah. She really
as Trey had demonstrated though before, he's not going to do that now, because if he disconnects the connection, it will cause our podcast to break. So we're not going to do that. But he could cut the connection to the.
No, I can do it. It's just shutting down the server here. Look, watch. Boom, done.
So Trey shut down the server.
Yeah.
And that means that no calls can be happening to a back end and everything.
Yep.
But as you can see, it's still running because, again, this runs on the front end. Yep. And there's a little bit of a funny circumstance that happens because of this, a funny bug that we're going to fix. Trey, you want to talk? Oh, actually, you just demonstrated it.
That was accidental.
That was accidental. Actually, so instead of that accidental one, what we're going to do is we're going to throw it over to our field reporter, Jake, who's going to be on location with Trey. Jake, are you there?
Thanks, Jake. I'm here with Trey Henry. Trey, you got something to show us here on the screen. What's going on right now?
Well, it's the screen you've already seen. And then it's the screen you've already seen without a chart.
Where did the chart go?
Who could say?
Who can say? That's Jake from the field.
Thank you.
Back to you, Jake.
Thanks, Jake, for that fine reporting. Let's move on to hotkey re-implementation. Again, Trey, go for it.
Yeah, this one I'm also very excited about, because before we had to do this whole as above thing, we showed the console and how we're running all these commands from it and everything. It's so cool. And and then we had to take this, big sort of step backwards, basically, to refactor. Not a step backwards, but we had to redo a bunch of things. But one of the things that we needed to redo was to engineer the way that our hotkey system worked, because our hotkey system was working with this kind of client server communication. And we actually, the first thing that we had to really move into the client, this was before we had as above, was actually the hotkey dispatching. We still kept the hotkey sort of the bulk of the hotkey code in Sobolo in our Phoenix app, but we had to move that into the client because if you watch previous episodes, it was because we were having problems preventing the default behavior of particular hotkeys that were doing things for the operating system or for the browser or whatever. So we needed to redo that, and so we pulled in another library for doing sort of front end stuff. That's a very lightweight, and it's a library that's actually relatively popular with the Elixir Phoenix crowd because it's mostly relatively declarative. There's not a ton of JavaScript that you need to write. It does support some things, but you can do a lot of things just completely declaratively in the markup. And it's called Alpine, and and so that's what we're using now for doing a lot of the sort of non-graphical, like this chart and all of that stuff, for doing the sort of normal kind of UI stuff that we don't want to have a back and forth with the server. That was a very long-winded way of saying we're doing this hotkey re-implementation, and I can actually demo it now, and I'm going to hit
the viewer, by the way, the viewer gave us feedback that said usually these cases where Trey spends an enormous amount of time explaining something, I will say, just to be clear, and then I will say, you re-implemented something in a nice framework so that we could use it nicely.
Yeah, exactly.
But I'm not going, due to the viewers' feedback, I'm not going to say just to be clear or just to be crystal clear anymore.
Yeah, exactly. So Command K or Control K on Windows, Command K on
Cosmic Console.
Open the Cosmic Console, and I'm going to hit that right now. Boom.
Boom. Coming soon to Isaac Asimov, the Cosmic Console.
Yeah, and this is really great too because so I was showing this before. So this is the server log. Excuse me, I have a little something in my throat. Hold on.
Yeah, better get that kombucha in there.
Yeah, that actually really helps. The airplane ride was just the air was really, really dry, and ever since then I've had a little bit of, I don't know, congestion. I'll just move this in a little bit. And then what's the hotkey in Arc to get rid of the side thing?
Oh, it's Command S.
There we go. Cool. So if I show here, I'll just do this down a little bit. So if I'm just going to put a little bit of space here, and then if I refresh this page, you'll see a bunch of stuff spit out in the log over here. But you'll notice also that it's not, even though it's doing these calculations, it's not talking to the server. Blah blah blah. We already did all of that stuff, and likewise. I'm hitting Command K to open the console and close the console, and you can see that there's also nothing going back and forth to the server. And this is even though
on the front end.
Yeah, it's all in the front end for the stuff that can be done entirely on the front end. But it's still using our perspective system, and it's still it's still connected via live view. It's just we don't have to do everything over the live view WebSocket. So,
and the reason we're really excited about this is because this will probably materially affect how much money we have to pay for server costs in order for us to run Cosmic.
Yeah,
and the cheaper we can run our servers, the less cost to serve there is. The less cost to serve there is, the less we have to charge in order to recoup our costs, which is great.
Yes, exactly. So that's that, and then I have one more secret demo which wasn't on the agenda.
I love secret demo. Okay, I'm here for it.
Yeah. So one of the things that after getting in, which was just today actually, getting in all the hotkey stuff, because we've been flying, and it's a Thanksgiving as well, so we're probably this next cycle is probably going to be relatively.
We'll be fatter. We're going to be fatter in our next video.
We take our Thanksgiving seriously around here. We deep fry a turkey, a whole turkey. deep fry that thing. And it's amazing. It's delicious. Anyway, after doing that stuff, I wanted to play around with interactivity in Pixie, which is the library that we use for doing our sort of client-side rendering stuff, which we showed last time. Last time I showed that there was a button, and you could click the button, and it would make the moon rotate, which was just demoing that, we're actually animating this thing. But now I can click on it.
Click the moon.
And make it rotate, and you can see that I could stop it, so I can toggle its rotation as well.
Try to make it smile. Let's get a smile out of that chart. Nope. Yay!
Now, actually, it looks like it's winking because the sun looks like one eye.
And yeah.
It's like, the chart's winking at you.
They don't talk about the placement of the moon and the sun to call it like the cosmic wink or anything like that.
Exactly.
Yeah.
So this actually, I was really excited about this because I was a little bit worried with moving from SVG and how we were doing everything before, with not only using SVG, but then also using reactive bindings to the SVG, so that when you update the data, it updates the thing. And so now we've moved to this other model where it's more like, we have this sort of surface that we draw on, which gives us a lot of capabilities, but it's also, I was a little bit worried that the interactive part of it was going to be maybe a little bit trickier. Not necessarily problematic, but trickier. This was easy peasy. The Pixie just gave us all the everything that we needed for this. And so this is what's going to also enable us to do like really interesting, cool interactions as well. So if for anybody that's familiar with Urania and like that sort of level of interactivity, we'll have that basically.
That is a wonky wink that it's giving us right now.
It's a derpy wink. It's like
it is a derp wink.
Okay.
Well, good. Thank you for secret demo.
Yeah.
Okay.
I'm gonna stop sharing.
We don't have anything else from a demo perspective to share, but one thing that came up as a little bit of a retrospective after we did the kind of re-platforming, right? So we caught early that using live view on the front end and the back end was not going to work because the front end was doing these calls and it wasn't as quick, especially with network lag. It was never going to be as quick as what we felt like we needed to be in order to be a product that we could be proud of. And the thing that came out of that was the as above and so below, which we've already talked about. But the thing that kind of came off of that Trey and I had discussed was, well, I don't think that we necessarily make decisions really well, because we made a decision and I don't think it was well researched, honestly. And this is no shade to Trey, because I did the same thing. Like, I think sometimes we can just kind of be okay with like, we'll just kind of make a lot of shortcuts, because once decisions get really complex or you don't really understand kind of the implication of things, you kind of make a snap decision based upon liked data or feelings-based data, things like that. And it's not like to say that I'm not a feelings-based guy and that feelings don't belong within the space of making decisions, but you should just acknowledge that when you're doing it and know full well that like maybe you didn't do a thorough enough job, and therefore, anyways, all this to say that we can make decisions better. And I don't think I've ever worked in a space, nor have I ever been part of a team where I think we make decisions really well. So the first thing that you do when you say, I don't think we do this really well, and it's going to be materially affecting us probably down the line, we're going to have to make lots of decisions with where to put our resources, what we care about, where we want to live, like personal decisions as well.
Yeah.
How can we get better at that kind of thing? And so I did what everyone does in 2023. I went to the sage of all sages. I went to ChatGPT and I said, like, how can one work on decision quality? And actually, one of the books that I really enjoy that I'm currently reading, but put down for a bit because we're a little bit too, we're not at a place now to read it and to absorb all of the content of it, is a book called Brave New Work. And Brave New Work really is about how we can move from hierarchical decision making to autonomous kind of teams on the edges of individual contributors that can run with a lot of decision making power themselves. But that doesn't, you still want teams that make good decisions. That doesn't negate the fact that you Just because you make autonomous teams that can run fast means they could be making bad decisions and running. So how do we just improve our decision quality? Doing some research there, I ran across this gem of a book, which is going to be this screen, which is literally called Decision Quality, Value Creation from Better Business Decisions. And I'm reading it now, and I'm really enjoying it and bringing in the framework to the discussions, even in the first part that I've already read. So bringing that framework into discussions that I've had with Trey about like essentially a decision backlog we have to make about things about the business we have to decide and when we have to decide them. And we don't have to implement them by then, but we do have to make a decision. And it was kind of the end of the airplane ride that I did this. Trey, you can imagine being crispy like after 9 hours, and we were of course towards the back of the plane with the kids. So it was
With
a
one
little bit
child in
even.
particular that managed to squeal nonstop for 10 hours.
Yeah, it was a lot. I could hear that kid. So I put my AirPods, my noise canceling AirPods in, and then I put these earphones on top of the AirPods. So I had dual noise canceling, and then I was blasting music through here, which was kind of lightly going through, and I could still hear the child. And I was like, how could this be? And the parents seemed to be, it seemed to be normal for the parents because they seemed inured to the whole thing. Anyways, that aside. Towards the end of the plane ride, when I was reading this book, I was like, let's create a decision log and we're going to talk about these things. It was really great. Trey, any feelings that you have from this? There's one thing that I've learned in particular that I think the viewer might like, but I wanted to like get your voice in here before I started talking about that.
Oh yeah, thanks. Yeah, no, I love all of that, and I think looking back at the, it's a big part of it. I think is knowing knowing what your what trade-offs you're making, and having a little bit better of sort of rigor around that, because I was optimizing for one particular thing with our initial stack, which was my productivity. As the sole developer at Cosmic Plumbing today, I wanted to be as efficient as possible. And so the way that I went about that was to pick a platform that would allow me to be very efficient, and then to only target that one thing, hoping, sort of just kind of, yeah, hoping that that would serve us well on all fronts. And to be fair, it does on many fronts. But then we got
But
to this
not
certain
on
point,
all fronts.
but not on all
Yeah.
fronts. And then we got to a certain point, and it was like, okay, when it comes to chart rendering, this is one thing that we have to be able to do incredibly quickly without network latency in the middle. And then we had to kind of like go back and rethink all of that stuff.
Yeah.
Which, yeah, like you said, it's fine. Like it's good that we were able to do this fairly early on. But yeah, but how do we learn from our mistakes and learn moving forward so that we can try to be a little bit better around our decision making? And also, one of the things that I also liked about this, we both agreed on this when we were talking on the plane, was the fact that I think we both are the kind of people that when we have a deadline, or we know that there's sort of some, like, we need to make a decision. It doesn't have to be done, but we need to make a decision on this thing by this date, and this is kind of what's involved in that decision. Then it pushes that forward, and then that, like, okay, we have to do this by this time, and so I'm gonna have to spend some time doing research. I need to get, like, yeah, it's I like the idea of deadline. It does.
Yeah.
It works for me.
One material way, me too, absolutely. And I'm actually looking forward to the conversation about the deadline that we're going to have, because it will be good to have a date or a couple of dates in our mind so that
Yeah.
we're kind of working to, because it feels a little too, it all feels very fluid, and we're moving, we're making good progress, but it all doesn't feel like it's converging just yet.
Yeah.
Um,
Like, it's all kind of, we're doing a lot of back end work and a lot of like groundwork, and we do these demos and we show stuff in these videos, but it's really like, yeah, we want to get to the point where the ball is really rolling.
yeah. One of the things that we've already started to use this decision framework that's in this book is around the framing of a piece of Cosmic that is probably not going to come out in the version 1, but we're very excited about, which is around interpretation. The reason why we're very excited about interpretation is because we want Cosmic eventually to be a place where people feel like there is good research happening on a number of charts from, famous people, from research charts. And if people are so willing to do so, they can anonymously I guess anonymously put their data in and then have these charts as research charts as well. And one thing that Trey and I were always kind of hemming and hawing about, which is why we were delaying the decision, is like, if you get someone to enter in data about something and they have an opinion about something, now all of a sudden you are a social network or a quasi-social network. And that comes with user-generated content comes content moderation and all of the pain of that. And instead of like avoiding the question, which is we're like, maybe one day we'll get to it, maybe one day we'll get to it. We're like, okay, let's use this framework and at least we can do step 1 of this. We don't have to make a decision about whether we're going to do this, but if we're going to do this, what would this look like? Interpretation, this is the definition of interpretation. And this is where we wrote success criteria, right? So Trey and I agreed on the success criteria, or basically the framing of the problem. And if unless we can meet these 2 things, we're not going to do this. So for this example, it has to be an actual interpretation of objective facts, talking about Britney Spears's, whatever house where this thing happened, whatever, versus like dog whistling certain things, that kind of thing. And then we're talking a little bit about content moderation. And it just felt good because it was like, now we can this thing helped us to unlock a conversation that I think that we were avoiding because we didn't have a good framework to even talk about like how we would go about making a decision or what would be success in this case. And it sounds very basic, and now that I'm saying it, it is very basic, but maybe we're just types of basic people that needed that kind of thing. It's fine.
I don't know. I think this is something that everybody has a problem with because even really, it's very similar to being able to take a very large engineering problem and being able to break it down into smaller chunks so that you can make progress on it. And even, engineers that have been in the industry for a really long time and they're really solid engineers have problems with this. Like sometimes you just get something dropped on you and you're like, I don't know what to do with this. Like it's too much. And, you just have to break it down into little bite-sized chunks and define these individual things. Like this is its own little actor in this whole space and it talks to these other things in this way and it has a clear interface and I can implement that thing and I'm just going to do that part right now and I'm not going to worry about the rest of the stuff, but I know that I need to do that stuff. But and then you do it in chunks. And I think as a decision framework, I think this kind of supports that same idea as well. It's like because like you said, otherwise we would just sit on this.
Yeah, and we would just never do it.
Yeah.
And it would just kind of sit around.
Yeah.
And the other thing that I really liked about the book so far, just last thing before we kind of wrap up here, is that the idea of the successfulness of a decision is not based upon its outcome necessarily, because there's things about the outcome that you cannot control, right? You make a decision, but the outcome, there could be macroeconomic forces, there could be societal forces that are in play, but the quality of a decision versus the quality of the outcome are separated, which I think also helps to make decisions easier to make, because you can assess the quality of a decision now based upon the way in which you've run through your personal framework on how you make decisions versus the outcome. And the great example, when I was reading the book, the great example of this came to my mind when my mother-in-law, who was the general manager of a casino, I don't think I asked to do so. Maybe it was kind of forced upon me, but she entered me into a
you were
a
voluntold, probably.
I was voluntold to go into a Texas Hold'em a Texas Hold'em tournament. And the tournament had this thing where like you could do, there was certain maximum bets you can do on each round. It's 3 passes, whatever. Anyways, I was doing relatively well in the tournament, kind of narrowed down to like the point where we're getting close to where you earn money in the tournament. And I've dealt pocket aces. So if you don't know Texas Hold'em, you get 2 cards. There are 5 cards that are eventually going to be laid out for, that's a common pool of cards. That's called the flop, the
turn.
turn, and the river. Thank you. The flop is 3 cards, the turn is 1, the river is 1, and you get 2 cards. And of the 7 cards that you have, the 2 you have and the 5 that are common, you get to make a 5-card hand. Anyways, I got dealt pocket aces, which means I have an ace and ace in my hand, which is the best thing that you could possibly get down. And the secret here is to not just bet everything and then scare everybody away. You kind of compel people into betting. And I did such a good job looking like I was bluffing that I actually got a bunch of money into the pot. And when when the turn, when the flop happens, a queen comes up. Okay, fine, no aces, but I'm still betting, whatever. The turn, nothing. And then the river had another queen. And when I flip over my cards, I have 2 aces, which is pretty good, but somebody had 3 queens towards the end there. And this is the whole point of like, luckily, I think for my benefit, that tournament, I did not earn money in that tournament because I think I would have kept playing tournaments and God only knows what would have happened to our money at that point. I know me and I know my ego. And so I'm glad that my ego was kind of quashed at the point. But I think that's a perfect demonstration of a very good decision process, right? I was compelling people to put money in and the outcome was actually crap. But like we can look back to the decision process and I said, I played that hand perfectly. And actually the guys around the table, and it was all men, the guys around the table said like, you played that perfectly. It's a real shame this happened to you. And I was like, nah, it happens.
Yeah, exactly. That is a great example because it's you always want to make the best decision that you can, such that later on you don't like look back and say like, oh, it should have been I could have made a better decision there, you know.
Yeah.
But then, once the decision is made, then you play the hand. That's it.
Yeah, exactly. Until you get new information. And I'm sure there's other ways that this whole decision quality book is going to play into our lives. I don't think that, like, generally speaking, it's one of those things that I think everyone thinks they're a good driver and everyone thinks they make good decisions. And that's not statistically true. And I know that I'm a good driver. I can prove that. But I do know that I could work on my decision quality skills. And that's all we're talking about here.
Yeah. Yeah.
Do you think I'm a good driver?
I think you're a great driver. That's why you're the only one that like I am completely happy with you driving, especially in Berlin where it's like I would not drive in Berlin. It's very stressful.
Yeah. But we don't own a car.
Yeah.
It's fine. It's all very
but we use like miles and stuff like that like like
car sharing services.
Car sharing services, yeah.
Yeah. Okay. I mean, this podcast kind of fell off a cliff. Anything else we want to talk about?
I think, considering how jet lagged we are and everything, I think we're doing great.
Yeah. Hey, viewer, why don't you tell us how we're doing? Comments below. We haven't had a comment until someone told us that we use to be very clear. So if you would like to give us a more constructive comment, we're here for it. All right. Be well. Take care. Love you. Bye.